Hello, welcome to this AVLAND review of the Pioneer VSX922 home cinema receiver. We're going to show you around this product, its connections, we're going to walk you through its setup menus, give you a bit of an idea of how to set it up, and its Android control application. We're also going to give you an idea of what we think about it as a product. The 922 from Pioneer is a 7-channel AV receiver. It's rated at 105 watts per channel. Albeit it says that it's 20 to 20 kilohertz, which is RMS, but it doesn't say whether it's all channels driven or just one channel driven. It features 1080p upscaling and video conversion to HDMI, meaning if you've got an analog source, the up conversion will change it into a digital HDMI. So just one cable going off to your television, and you can plug in like an old Xbox that's only got component out, or a Wii console, or just some other source that's only got an analog video output, so component or composite. It has Dolby True HD and DTS HD decoding and Dolby Pro Logic 2 Z decoding. It features Pioneer's own in-house MC-ACC auto setup, which means you plug a microphone into the front of it, you place the microphone where you want to where you're going to be listening from, and it will set up the speaker levels and volumes and distances. Here you can see the little plastic flap roof at the front. It also has a front USB input for an iPad, a USB stick, an iPod Touch, and a video input to go with it. It actually comes supplied with that cable, so you can actually play videos back through it as well from your iPhone or iPod. It will also charge an iPad too on that front connection. The 922 is their mid-price receiver. Here you can see the back panel. It has all 6 of its HDMI inputs on the rear panel, as well as the HDMI out. No HDMI input on the front, but for some people it's more useful to have them all on the back, so that could be a good thing. It has a network connection there for internet streaming, music, and also internet radio. You can get an optional Wi-Fi dongle, which is powered from that little USB port next to it. And it has optical coaxial digital audio inputs as well. Here are the speaker connections, and you can assign the amplifiers to do different tasks. So they can be surround back, or they can be front height, or they can be zone 2, or you could just use it as 5.1 and ignore those completely. You don't have to use the extra speakers at all. There's its analog inputs, the composite and component. It has twin subwoofer pre-outs. That little adapter port is for a Bluetooth dongle. That Bluetooth adapter allows you to play music back from a Bluetooth audio device like an iPhone or something like that. Not as good though as using your network. There's higher bandwidth on your network. You can stream higher formats of audio. So that's the best way to stream music to, is across your network. The rear terminals are dual. You can use either bare wire, or you can use 4mm banana plugs. You just pop the little plastic caps out and in they go. Banana plugs are best. Onto its setup menus. This is where you adjust all the settings for the auto setup. You could just plug it in, and here's a little demonstration of what happens when you do that. So it starts to emit a test tone from each speaker, and the microphone then measures what's going on from each channel and tries to work out whether you've got it correctly wired, whether it's the distance, whether the level's correct, what frequencies that the speaker responds to. You can do all this manually as well, and you can also tweak it afterwards and change what you want. This is where it will show you the results of which speakers it thinks are connected. And it does quite a lot of different things. It takes quite a long time. The demo here is speeded up, which is quite useful for this purpose of what we're doing here. This is where you can check the different settings that it's saved, and if you disagree, you say, "Oh, nice front speakers, they're not small, they're full range speakers." You can have an overview of what it's done. Here's where you change the different levels. The distances as well are in there. It has the standing wave control, and it shows you what it thinks is going back from that. Here's the equalization, where you can adjust it for each channel. This is the left channel selected. You can manually do that as well. This is where you clear the information, or you can save, make a copy of the actual settings that the auto calibration has come up with. Now here's where you go into the manual speaker setup. So if you don't want to do any of that, you just want to set it up manually, this is where you adjust it all. You tell it which speakers you've got connected and what sort of speakers they are. You can assign those different inputs. You can buy amps, so if you've got binaural speakers, you can have those 6th and 7th amps, as well as the 1st and 2nd front amps, all on your front channel, so improving sound quality for stereo. Especially useful if you've got big floor ceiling speakers and you're not using it as 7.1. This is where you set the speakers to small or large. As a rule of thumb, if the speakers are satellite speakers, then you set that to small. If they're full-size, conventional size speakers, then you set it to large. When it's set to small, it will send more of the lower bass frequencies to the subwoofer. When it's set to large, it will send all the frequencies to the front speakers and bass information to the subwoofer. The subwoofer will take over a bigger role if you set it that way. This is where you set the levels for each channel. If you're not happy, if you think the rears are too quiet, if you think the centre's too loud or too quiet, you can adjust all of that in that menu. It's not something you need to do straight away out of the box, but it's the first thing that we tend to go to in an AV amplifier AV receiver when we unbox it is we will go in and we'll set the distances, we'll set the levels up. This is where it shows what the actual curve of the speakers is, what frequency response is, and you can adjust that to some predetermined settings in there. Input setup, you can change, you can rename each input, you can skip it so that when you're going up and down the inputs, if you're not using an input, it just bypasses it and goes to the next one. You can change the on-screen languages. You've got various different ones here. The network setup, you can change it to a manual IP, or you can allow it to pick one up from a DHCP server in your router. Here's where you set whether you want the networking functions to be on when it's in standby. That's useful if you want to use the control application for Android or an iPad or iPhone. Because it won't switch on from that unless that's enabled. This is where you switch on the things like the audio return channel and the PQLS, which is set to auto. The PQLS function, what that does is if you've got a compatible Pioneer Blu-ray player, it links the clocks, the master clocks between the receiver and the Blu-ray player so that only one of them is used, and this cuts down and reduces jitter in the transmission of digital audio, thereby improving digital sound quality. It's something fairly unique to Pioneer and certainly unique that it's done down the HDMI. Very useful. Here's where you can set a volume limit so people can't turn it too loud. 0 dB is what I would recommend. That's full volume if you're receiving a normal signal. You can change it so you can have multiple units in the same room. You can have up to 4 different ones. You can update the software via the internet or via USB stick, update its firmware. If there's any kind of bugs that need ironing out or extra features they want to add, that's where they'll do it. You can set the menus to either a basic or expert. I don't really see the point in this. You want to be able to see all the functions. So let's now see what the components are like under the lid of the VSX922. So inside here you can see on the left that's the main heatsink. That's where all the amplification modules are on that board that's clipped onto it. That's going up vertically from the base. So all 7 channels are there present on the same board. And then to the right we have the actual HDMI video processing, audio processing circuit. That's the main brains of the amplifier, connected to the front panel there by a ribbon cable. You can see that all 6 HDMI inputs directly go onto that board. It's where you can see there's little Pioneer chips. You can see a little DTS and Dolby Digital chip up there that does all the decoding. The main power supply as well. If we spin it around from the other way around, that's the power supply. That's what gives it the ability to amplify. It's where the current comes in and the voltage is stepped down to power each amplification module. Important part of any amplifier is the power supply. without a good power supply, it can't live up to its power ratings. Here's the menu for the DLNA settings. This is how you browse music. You can browse by folder, which is very useful if you want to play back files that don't have any tag information, or if the DLNA server can't actually offer up the tag information. WAV files don't have any tag information natively, and FLAC is hit and miss with some DLNA servers. We're also showing you here what's going on in the front panel of the VSX922. Here we've selected a FLAC file to play. It shows you the bit rate that it's at, which is a staggering 9,216 kilobits per second, and that's because this is a 192 kilohertz 24-bit FLAC file. It shows you can do this from the front panel. You don't have to have your television switched on. The display will show you what's going on. You can navigate it that way. It's obviously easier if you have it on through your television, and you get the bonus of being able to see album art as well. So it'll do high definition audio, as we just showed you. These are WAV files, so not only will it do FLAC, it will do native WAV files as well. Again, we're going to show you here it playing a 192 kilohertz. This is completely uncompressed, just raw WAV file. Again, there the bit rate identical to the FLAC, because all FLAC does is data compression. So once it's been unpacked, the data, it outputs at the same bit rate as it's the same size file. Just try playing a 5.1 file here, and you'll see it can't do that. Unfortunately, it's not something it's able to do. It can only do stereo WAV files. Here's the internet radio function. You can browse by different places where you are in the world, and it'll give you sort of popular stations from your area. Here we're picking ones in the UK, and you can select various different podcasts or just listen to live radio. You'll find that this generally sounds better than DAB. This is running at 128 kilobits per second, but it's a much newer codec than what's used on DAB. It's quite old now, it's 20 years old. Here's the control application. We're showing you the Android one, which is very, very similar to the Apple one. We're showing you what it's like to use on a Android tablet. It looks quite slick. It's probably, of all the ones in the market, it's the most slick user interface. A lot of work's gone into this by the look of it. However, I can't help but feel that it's kind of, it's style, fashion over function. I would prefer it if it was a bit more easy to, you didn't have to go through so many different menus, or if there was a more functional version of it, so you could get rid of all the sort of glitz and just have it just narrowed down to raw control. I don't like having to go through lots of different menus to get to what I want to do. I prefer to have more information on there. You can see here as well, it doesn't really differentiate between it being, or it doesn't seem to, between it being on a small phone or being on a tablet-sized device. So the buttons are absolutely huge, way bigger than they need to be on a tablet, but probably just the right size for a phone. I imagine more and more people will be using tablet-based machines, whether it's iPad or an Android tablet like we are using, and so really they need to have a separate one that puts more information on when it's a tablet. The volume control as well, it's very gimmicky. I'd much prefer if the volume control was just up and down. I don't like having to pretend I'm using a real volume control. That seems a little bit silly. I would rather it was more functional. Having said that, you can do an awful lot with this over what other apps are on the market for different audio receivers. Here's all the different surround modes. You can browse those. It has a few different other little tricks as well as sort of basic control. Some of it is very, very gimmicky. But here you can change sort of the same sort of things that are in the setup menu, but it would make more sense to me if it was more just like the setup menu. Here's where you can adjust the video settings. You can set it depending on you can adjust the video, so whether you have the amplifier playing around with the video signal. I prefer it was just straight through. I like to think that I've got a good source, I've got a good display device. I just want the amplifier to pass the signal through, unless I choose to add upscaling. I don't want to on a Blu-ray be messing around with what is a very good signal. Here you can also use it. This is where it's really useful, I find, is a zone 2 control. You can use it to set the volume and that sort of thing, change inputs for the zone 2. Here's this Sound Explorer. It's exceptionally gimmicky. Not plainly obvious what all these things are. You have to kind of click on them and see. I'd much rather just have a list. I know that might sound a bit boring or old-fashioned, but I'd much rather just have a list of the different things and an explanation of what they are, rather than having to click on each of them like this to show them. It looks neat. It's impressive in that it's advanced in that way, but it's ultimately you're using it as a control medium. You want it to look and feel easy to use. It doesn't need to have all little animations. It doesn't need to have all these things floating around. It just needs to be quick and easy to use. I find it's not. So you've got this thing here that uses the different things inside the tablet. You hold it and you can adjust the balance accordingly between the front, back and left and right. Again, very gimmicky and unnecessarily so, unfortunately. So, pros and cons. Pros wise, it's fairly feature packed. It does have Apple AirPlay on, and it also has the ability to stream 192 kilohertz. The PQLS function is fairly unique. That's a very good thing that it locks the clocks. I wish more manufacturers would do that between their Blu-ray players and their AV receivers at this price point. On the downside, sound-wise, not as good as some of the other ones on the market. It's still very good, considering it's got 7 amps, considering its price. But for me, there are others on the market that perform better, especially for music, than the VSX922. Also, the build quality isn't great. It's plastic. It knows it. It looks it. It feels it. And the app, while it looks very glitzy as we just saw, it's not very functional. It's not as easy as just picking up the remote control and using that. I wouldn't choose the app over its own remote. Its own remote, on the other hand, has got lots of buttons on it, which to some people it's maybe got too many, but to me the remote's much better in that you can do lots of things directly. You just pick the remote up, you press a button, it does it. The app, you've got to go through different menus. The volume control doesn't need to be a page on its own. It could just be down the side of every single screen. So if you're changing input, changing sound format, you can also change the volume at the same time. I'd like that to be the first thing you see when you load the app. The ability to change input, the ability to change sound mode, the ability to change the volume. That should all be on the sort of home screen. So that's the disappointing thing for me, is that the app looks glitzy, but it just isn't very functional. That's the end of our review of the VSX922. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. If you'd like to see more specifications or more images of the products, please visit our website, avland.co.uk. You'll also find on there more video reviews of other products. Thank you very much.